time. Thank you, Olivia. For those new to Women in Film San Francisco Bay Area, we are a volunteer-run nonprofit organization that actively provides networking, educational, and social opportunities for over 10,000 people in film, television, and digital media in the San Francisco Bay Area and beyond. Our mission is to empower and promote and celebrate women's creative work. If you are interested in joining, you can click on the join link within the chat. So go on over to the chat and the information is there. On behalf of Women in Film, San Francisco Bay Area's Board of Directors, Carol Hall, Diane Walsh, Neil Benerdum, Kelly White, Nicole Carlson, Amy Zenz, Darlene DeRose, and myself, I would like to thank you so much for choosing to spend your afternoon with us. We really appreciate it. And before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping Zoom mechanics. So if at any time during this afternoon you have a question, please just type it in the chat. And if you want to save the chat at the very end, you just go to clicking the three dots at the bottom of the screen and then click on Save Chat. And also to avoid sound issues, please mute your audio now, if you can, please. That way we don't have the background distractions. We'd also like to encourage you to go to the top right-hand corner of the screen and click on View and then select Speaker. So take a moment, and that way you can get the best visual experience during the panel discussion today. And that's it for housekeeping. I'd like to say thank you to our community partners for this event. CineQuest, they've always been so helpful and supportive, and the Alliance of Women Directors, Bravemaker, Black Film Space, and Women in Film and Television US. It's these organizations that really keep us having the world know what we're up to. So we're very appreciative of our partners, and it's just vital to the outreach and the expansion. So we thank them for their generosity and support of Women in Film San Francisco Bay Area. So thanks for sharing part of your day with us. And I know it's for some of you, it's part of your night. So we really appreciate it. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our Vice President, Diane Walsh, who actually put this together along with many other of our amazing board of directors. So thank you, Diane. A big special thank you to you for putting this together. Going to give it over to Diane.
Okay, so thank you, Julie, and welcome everyone. I really appreciate you sharing the time in this little Zoom room with us today, and for your interest in adaptation, which is why you decided to join us. This panel presentation is going to give all of you producers, writers, actors, screenwriters, all of us creatives in general, valuable information about how to find, secure, and adapt content from one medium to another. We're thrilled to have Jennifer Wilkoff, a dual WIFSPA member. She's also a member of New York Women in Film and is coming to us from New York today, as are some of our other panelists. She's going to be moderating the discussion today. So let me tell you a little bit about Jennifer before they get started. She'll be introducing the rest of the panel. She's a #1 international best-selling author, producer, award-winning freelance writer, and a respected entertainment consultant. Through her company, Your Book is Your Hook, which I love that title. She also teaches and educates groups like the Writers Guild of America East, the Motion Picture Association, on this topic, as well as others. Her keen eye for stories that sell for both Hollywood, independent producers, books, writers is trusted by industry professionals who appreciate her savvy in being able to see the many possibilities one single subject could lend itself to through adaptation, through that process, which we're going to be learning about more today. So now's the time when I stop talking and I hand things over to Jennifer and her panel for the discussion we've all been waiting for. So take it away, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Diane. It really has been such an amazing process to be able to work with you and your wonderful team there. So thank you so very much. I am coming to you from New York City, as Diane mentioned, and it is my pleasure to lead this panel this evening with my esteemed colleagues who are in literary and entertainment working in the industry today. And so I will introduce them briefly, and then we're going to start our discussion because there is a lot to cover when it comes to the topic of adaptations. And to help you round out your understanding of them is Mary Miles, who is an entertainment attorney and the founding partner of an entertainment law firm with offices in New York. And her practice focuses on all areas of entertainment and media law, including film, both documentary and narrative, television, scripted and non-scripted, literary publishing, and new media. I know that you've all seen their bios in the literature that's gone out and the newsletters from WIFSPA. So I'm being brief, but Mark DeGasperi he is a scout who does coverage, and he'll be talking more about what he does with the individual film studios that he works with. And he has been a writer, lecturer, and professional story analyst in New York for many years. He has read and scouted screenplays, plays, and books for film and TV adaptation, most recently for Sony Pictures Entertainment, Tribeca Productions, LBI Entertainment, Centropolis Entertainment, and the Johnson Production Group. He has also covered potential movie and TV material for Paramount Pictures, Universal Pictures, New Line Cinema, the William Morris Agency, International Creative Management, that's ICM and WME, and past companies like Miramax Films, Jonathan Demme's Clinica Estetico, and Stanley Jaffe's Jaffa Films. He also is an advanced film and television writing professor at NYU here in New York at the SPS School. Lane Schefter Bishop is a multi-award winning Hollywood producer. She is a director who has received numerous accolades for her work, including an Emmy and the DGA Fellowship Award for episodic television. She is also currently the CEO of Vast Entertainment, the go-to book-to-screen company since an online interview on CNN dubbed her the book whisperer of Hollywood. And she has numerous projects, both completed and in active development. She is also currently a showrunner for Up TV. And she has also written and produced and directed for Lifetime and many other channels on cable. Jo Michelle Williams is a producer and supervising producer. She is a working television producer and writer who has created content for broadcast networks, NBC's Biggest Loser, streamers, HBO Max, Ellen's Next Great Designer, and cable networks Lifetime's Project Runway All-Stars and A&E's Confession of a Serial Killer, BTK. And she sat on panels for Chelsea Film Festival, been a guest lecturer at Chapman University, and a judge for the Emmys. Kelly Thomas is a literary agent, an associate literary agent with Serendipity Literary Agency, and she is a certified copy editor with a bachelor's degree in English from Pace University. She is an associate member of the Association of American Literary Agents, AALA, and a member of the Editorial Freelance Association. And so tonight we have quite an eclectic group that we have gathered for this panel because it needs it. Because adaptations, as I always like to say, and everybody likes to laugh, is not a solo sport. Adaptations take lots of different pieces of the puzzle to put them together. So before we dive any deeper, let's take a look at what adaptations really means and why they're so important to us in literary and entertainment. So adaptation is really about taking a story that has appeared somewhere in one place, one medium, and actually adapting it to something else, which you probably know. But oftentimes we don't think about all the different types of adaptations there are, which include not only books to film, but also television to film. We also have now television to streaming. We have film to streaming. We have stage to streaming, stage to film. We have comic books. We have video games. We now have podcasts, which we didn't have before. We have lots of different places. Radio programs have gone to television, have gone to film, and backwards and forwards. So adaptations became very important in the film industry way back in 1927. And that's because that's when the first Oscars took place and were given out. And the play Seventh Heaven by Austin Strong won the Adaptations Award for Seventh Heaven that was actually nominated for Benjamin Glazer. When we actually start to come forward and we start to look at adaptations, there are so many different ones. We have novels, we have plays, we have pieces that you know that have been made and remade, like Little Women, which basically was first made in 1932, that then has been remade in more recent times. There are many others that span lots of different genres, and also everything from children's to fiction to nonfiction, all kinds of stories, all kinds of articles, all of them adaptations, and all of them that matter. And so when you start to think about what have we done, you can look at something like Django Unchained, realize that that came from a comic book. Look at something like My Fair Lady, which actually in 1938 was a play that was by George Bernard Shaw, but became the film Pygmalion, which then became My Fair Lady, which ended up on both stage and screen as My Fair Lady. And so the adaptations continue throughout every year. If you go back and you look at every Oscars, even in the late years that we have now, you'll find that they never stop. They have their own category, and there are people who really hunker down and train to become a screenwriter for adaptations. Why does somebody want to do an adaptation? Well, if you have something that already has an audience, it's a shoo-in that you're probably going to get something that has an audience when you make it again, right? And the best example I can give you right now is what's coming out in the theater this weekend. Gladiator 2. Gladiator had a huge audience for the original film. Boom, do a sequel, right? Bang. And yes, that's right, folks. Wicked is going to be in the theaters this weekend, which is still on Broadway, celebrated its 20th anniversary on Broadway. And they actually shot that sequel while they were shooting this film, which is going to come out in November 2025. So they've already got the audience built in to move the adaptation down the field. And so these are tactics that are used to be able to leverage story that already exists, story that sells. And so the adaptation is really the most pivotal point that Hollywood and the stage and other investments that are made can bank on to get people to actually come and see them, or sometimes even read them, because people may look at a property and then they may make a prequel or they may make a sequel. But before you do that, you want to make sure that you follow some guidelines. We'll give you some rails to actually ride on and rails to not go off during this presentation. And the first person to actually help us with that is Mary Miles, because the most important thing you can do is understand the following points. We're going to take them one at a time. We're going to go through 4 of them. So first, let's talk about copyright, which is important, and not doing copyright infringement. The second piece is also about public domain, when it's okay to actually take something. Mary, can you give us the difference, please?
Of course. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Jennifer. So let's start with a basic understanding of what a copyright actually is. So copyright is defined as the original expression of an idea fixed in a tangible medium. So I just said a lot of words that you were just like, what does this all mean? So it is the expression, it's the original expression. So there has to be a level of originality, and it's the expression of the idea. It's not the idea in and of itself. So as lawyers and legal scholars in the Supreme Court, we contemplate this idea expression continuum. The closer something is to an idea, the less protection it receives. The closer it is to full expression, the more a copyright protection it receives. And fixed in a tangible medium means it's been captured somehow, whether it's the click of a shutter on a camera in printing on film, whether it's hitting the save button on your computer, whether it's a brush stroke on canvas. So that is fixing it, putting it there. Normally, I would normally say what I'm saying right now isn't fixed, so I have no copyright in it, but I'm being told it's recorded. So hence, there is a fixation being happening, and the copyright will be owned by the person who is actually fixing it, right? So that is what a copyright is. That's first. A copyright infringement is when 2 prongs must be met. There is access to the original material, and there is substantial similarity to that material. Now, a copyright owner has several exclusive rights, and those rights include, and it's inherent. Lawyers aren't really that smart. We just use big words, but we're really not original, and we're not that smart. So basic things like copying, allowing other people to create works. Those are called derivative works. Displaying, performing, exhibiting. So basic things that we're used to seeing, right? Think about the trajectory of a film or a theatrical play. These are all part of the bundle. But in our world, and what we're talking about here is specifically creating derivative works. So a derivative work is accessing a pre-existing copyrighted work that you are taking material from that is substantially similar or based on it. Inherently, it is a copyright infringement. But so in order to avoid the copyright infringement in the lawsuit, we want to gain some kind of permission. So that's where we're going to talk about rights and agreements and what those agreements look like. Or the material can be in the public domain. So one of the great examples I love to give is Romeo and Juliet. We all know the story. Then we've got West Side Story, right? More recent history. And then we've got The Notebook. And then we've got the Step Up dance film, right? Exactly the same story, very different expressions of that story, and no one's suing each other over a copyright infringement because it's the expression that matters, not the idea. Jennifer, did I not give you enough there?
No, you did great. And you also happened, ironically, not coincidentally, to pick some adaptations in your examples, which is awesome, right? Because West Side Story has been remade a couple of times, which also has its own origination. And you also talked about The Notebook, which not only was a book that was by Nicholas Sparks, but also became its own film and then is now on Broadway. So there you go, the trifecta. And, you know, adaptations happen because either you have looked at the public domain and said, hey, this is going on. But Mary, there's a wrinkle in there, and I know it's in there, because when you actually have something like West Side Story and you base it on the adaptation that Steven Spielberg did recently, that's a problem, isn't it?
Of course, you need to get permission from the original copyright owner, and Steven Spielberg has a way of getting what he wants. But the biggest issue there, right? So there are a number of rights, especially with West Side Story. There's the derivative work of the actual film, the story, the characters, the what is happening, and there's also the derivative work on the music. So West Side Story is a particularly complicated situation because there are a number of and levels of rights that need to be cleared for a derivative work and re-recording and things like that.
Right. And so part of what we want to talk about are these rights. And we're going to break the rights down into 3 different categories to make sure that we hit the granularity involved in each one. And so the first one is really when somebody comes forward and says, hey, I see you have a really nice story there. I'd like to actually write the adaptation for it. Mary, what should they do before they do anything with that particular situation?
So the first thing is to make sure that you are actually going to the person who owns the material. And this is called checking the chain of title. So similar to those of you who have bought a home or an apartment, or a plot of land for that matter, there's a chain of title search to ascertain the actual owner. That's what we do for copyrights. And the Copyright Office is a great directory. I might add, you should be registering your works with the Copyright Office because it's the only authority that matters in this country. And you can go there to copyright.gov, COPYRIGHT. There's no W in copyright, .gov. And it's a great place to just look something up, right? You'll be able to track it by title, by author, all kinds of things. Those materials are available through 1976, I believe. Before that, you'll have to get some kind of archivist or put in a special request to seek that. But it's a great first stopping place just to see what's going on with the work. Google is also very helpful. And if you're interested in a book, opening the flap of the book and seeing the copyright notice, or maybe who the credited agent is, or even the publisher, reach out to the publisher and ask them if they can put you in touch with the author, if they have the rights. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But make sure that whatever tree you're barking up is the correct tree to be barking up.
Amen. And so as we go down the lane a little bit, and we actually get to the right person, right, who owns that property, right now we're going to stay in the lane of options, because then there's something called an option agreement where somebody says, hey, I'd like the option to work with that story. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that particular type of agreement and what's an option?
Sure. So an option agreement, let's just continue on this hypothetical path that you're interested in adapting a book to a film, and you would get in touch with the author or the representatives, inquire as to availability, and then you would send over a proposal for an option agreement. An option agreement essentially is a 2-part agreement. One, it takes the material off the market, so that you have an exclusive period of time to develop that material. And the second thing it does is it allows you to purchase the material, and it has a specific grant of rights, and you know exactly what you're getting, when you're going to get it, and for how much you're going to get it. So the entire deal is encompassed in one agreement. And traditionally, we have customary parameters. I've done options, I've done many options in my career, but most of them are between 12 to 18 months, depending on the source material. I've done options for 6 months. I've done options for 36 months. So, they fluctuate depending on the deal. There's also some kind of fee, the option fee, that's payable as consideration for taking the property off the market. Option fees that I've worked on can be $10, and they can be, I think the largest option fee I did was $35,000. And then you have a designated purchase price. You know exactly what must be paid in order to trigger the grant of rights. So it's a great document to have. It's what anyone's going to ask if you're pitching the material to a studio or anyone else. They're going to say, do you have the option? Do you control the rights? And that is one way to control those rights.
So once we know that, sometimes people want to shop around, right? And so they want to see where can I get the best deal? It's almost like what we're going into with Black Friday, right? But shopping agreements are much different when it comes to Hollywood. Mary, what's a shopping agreement?
Okay, so where the option agreement says it contains the whole universe on this agreement, you know, what the rights are, how much it gets paid, when it gets paid. A shopping deal usually is for no to very little money. And for a very short period of time, you take the material again off the market and simply allow the person who controls the shopping to do that, to shop it. So there might be some development work that occurs, but the period of time is usually not very long. So shopping deals can be anywhere from 6 to 12 months. They're very quick, they're very effective. Lane is the queen of the shopping deal because she has a sense of exactly where something is going to go. And with all the people I've worked with throughout the years, Lane can sniff a deal out. She knows when it needs to be an option and she knows when it needs to be a shopping deal. And usually with a shopping deal, yes, there will be some materials, but it's a quick, I'm going to these 3 places, 5 places. I'm pitching. If it works, great. If not, I'm out. And that's why a lot of people choose a shopping deal. Now, the hazard or the benefit, depending on what side of the table you sit on, with a shopping deal is the universe is not contained in that document. So everyone, if there is a network or studio interested, everyone gets dragged to the negotiating table. So where the production company is shopping, they are leveraging their good relationships to bring a project, and they have no idea if this author is going to go cuckoo and blow the deal. And vice versa. You don't know if, as an author, what this producer is going to ask and if they're going to blow up the deal for a number of things and want to be included in all kinds of ways. So there is an inherent risk in it, but the positive side is that it's quick. So, and it's supposed to be very targeted. It's not, you don't have enough time to hit 50 meetings, right, in that period of time. So that's the fundamental difference. One, the universe is there, it's encapsulated, all the terms are there, and the other one drags everyone to the negotiating table when a deal is ready.
Then there's actually a new wrinkle for either of these, which is when somebody says, wow, your life is so interesting, or they see something in an article that's written about somebody else, or they see something that's being reported, like on a segment in 60 Minutes. And all of a sudden they say, gee, I think I'm going to write an adaptation about that. That's life rights. Mary, what are life rights?
So an option agreement traditionally, although it can be, but traditionally deals with underlying source material of any kind. It could be a movie, a song, a poem, a short story, a book, any inspiration, even a painting, quite frankly. Life rights address biographical information, and instead of focusing so much on not infringing someone's copyright like an option would, it focuses on protecting the production against defamation, invasion of privacy, and publicity claims. So they have a slightly different focus, although we do address the copyright infringement issue as well. But structurally, they're very similar because, again, we're not original thinkers, lawyers. So once we create a wheel, we like the wheel, we keep using the wheel. So structurally, they'll be very, very similar. An option period, option fees, purchase price, rights granted. Again, an encapsulated universe, but we do worry about defamation and invasion of privacy and publicity. And like the big one, I think, like the big blinking red light, if you haven't thought about it yet, I'll tell you, is Netflix. They've been getting, the last year at Netflix has been a busy, busy year for that legal department with all the biopics and all the stories going on. And you just keep wondering, what on earth is going on? Why didn't they clear this? Maybe they did, right? Maybe they didn't. But they certainly have been busy. And it's good case law for us where we can get a decision.
So that's a foundation that we need legally. So that's the first hurdle for an adaptation. And that's why we start with that conversation during this discussion, because before we start talking about what you're going to do with the rest of us, we want to make sure that you cross your T's and dot your I's with the legal considerations. Because one of the worst things, Mary, is for somebody to start writing an adaptation, do it for a year, bring it forward and get rejected, right?
Right. So I say, you know, it's like building a house. You want a strong foundation. If you have a rocky foundation, not good for the house. And again, if you like the exercise in writing and need the exercise in writing, God bless you. And maybe you need a paperweight to hold other things down at home. You need some coasters. I don't know. We all have different priorities in life, but the reality is, unless you really do need the exercise of writing a screenplay, it's very difficult to write what we would refer to as a spec script and turn around and sell someone on that idea. There may be other examples of this that I'm missing, but the one that is most prevalent in my mind is Creed. And you know, Sylvester Stallone is one of the most litigious people in Hollywood in protecting his property rights, and has even taken Rocky to the Supreme Court, which was really thrilling when you're in law school and you get to read the Rocky case. You're like, oh, this is so cool. But for him to listen, he's received many spec scripts, he's received many pitches, and he's turned everything down. Because he is very careful about it. So when he did receive that script for Creed, for him to actually say, yes, let's do it, it's like 1 in 10 million.
Thank you. When you're writing a project, one of the things that you heard me say about Lane is that she is the #1 book to film company. And adaptations oftentimes come from books, but they also have their pitfalls. And so, Lane, when somebody comes knocking on your door and they say, hey, I have this adaptation, I'm ready to go, what should they know and what should they do and stay clear of?
You know, I think Mary hit the nail on the head with the first part, which is they better have clear chain of title. They better actually have the rights to be showing me that material. Also, you know, one of the toughest things that we always discuss is that a lot of authors and people of that ilk would like to also do the screenplay themselves. You know, screenwriting and adaptation is a very different skill set than screenwriting some original idea you have. Because you have to take into consideration the people who are very excited about that book, the fans, all of that. We had a lot of discussion about that for the Dove. It's something that's very important to take into account because it's what they call underlying IP. It's intellectual property that you have that's beneath your screenplay. A book, a magazine, article, you name it. And that IP used to not mean much. And slowly but surely, over the years, you know, Twilight came out, Harry Potter came out, the list goes on. And suddenly everybody wanted books as underlying IP. And that was great for me because I was trying to hide books for so long because nobody reads. But the beauty is now books are very, very, very valuable. And so if I go in with 2 properties that are the same, 2 projects that are identical, literally, but one has a book as IP, that one's going to go first. It has what they consider a built-in audience. So it's very, very valuable to have that IP. You just have to make sure you have the rights to it. Getting back to the screenwriting part of this, you know, I give this advice a lot. You really don't want to write your own screenplay. You really don't. Because Hollywood is all about packaging. It's what a producer does. When people are like, what does a producer do? I always say they package. So what you're packaging is obviously the best stuff you can, the best material, the best director, the best screenwriter. So if you can get somebody on board who every studio and television, network wants to work with, you're going to have a much better chance of getting that project made than if they've never heard of you, book author wants to write the screenplay. And this also, by the way, goes for big names. Sandra Brown was on a project with me, and she's huge. But in Hollywood, she has never done an adaptation. She has never done a screenplay. So they actually they want a screenwriter who's done adaptation to do that screenplay. She was on every call, believe me. I kept her involved like nobody's business because she has great ideas and her books are amazing. But she had never written a screenplay specifically from one of her books. It's a very special skill set to be able to adapt. And so she did not end up doing the screenplay adaptation of her own, very, very, very popular book. So did I answer the question, Jennifer? I hope so.
You did. And so much more, and much more insight. And one of the things that happens to some writers is they write the screenplay and then they try to approach you. Can you tell us why that's a problem?
First of all, as I mentioned, probably going to need another screenwriter. But aside from that, I have started to do this kind of backwards thing where I try to find IP, underlying IP for that screenplay. This is a new thing. So, and believe me, it works both ways. People in Hollywood call me and go, this is an idea we have. See if you can find some underlying IP for it so it has more value. But same thing, people bring a screenplay and I'm like, okay, if you don't have a book, first of all, do your homework because I do mostly book to screen. But aside from that, it's very interesting to try to like reverse engineer basically. So you go online, and I recommend this a lot to screenplay writers, and I say find an article that inspired you to write your screenplay. Then you have your underlying IP, which gives it intrinsically more value. It's not so tough to do because there are a million articles on Google about everything. So you don't want to say based on, which I know Mary will talk about, but inspired by can work for you and can give you the underlying IP that you need so that you have value, built-in value.
Mary, what's based on?
I read this, I like it, I used it a lot. Inspired by is think Law and Order, right? It's hot off the presses, something that is interesting. You take the germ of an idea. See how I keep going back to the idea versus the expression. And you take that and you create your own little world, right? No one is going to say, in fact, the Supreme Court has said that ideas are not copyrightable because we should be free to use them. And it would stifle the creative nature should ideas be cut off at the legs, versus expression that should receive protection because people have put in a lot of sweat and energy and effort in creating and expressing their ideas.
Perfect. So let's go to Mark for a moment, because what happens also is that people say, which I get oftentimes with people who come to me, I wrote this great story and it's for Robert De Niro and this person and that, or it's for this studio. And Mark, you're the person who ultimately is going to probably be asked to cover that material. Can you tell us what you do and why you do it, and why is it important to the studio?
Why I do it? Well, I'm a freelance contractor, which is why I have to work for so many people, different companies. And as most everyone knows, when you submit to a producer or agent, they pay someone like me to generate what's called coverage, which is an analysis of the material, with some cogent commentary, what works, what doesn't work, etc. And what I often said in this venue is that 75% of the things that I am assigned to read as books to film, or books for television, I wouldn't buy. And if they were made into something, I wouldn't watch it. But it's not about what I like. It's, does the book fulfill the genre expectations of the audience, of that demographic that would watch that would buy that. So that's what I have to look out for, and that's what I think everybody needs to be aware of. So essentially we're looking for originality within a recognizable and popular formula. That also is, it has to have plausibility, clarity, and authenticity. So in answer to your question, those are things that we'd be looking for. Does it work for what it's supposed to be for the audience that would watch it? But just for very quickly, because I know Jennifer always starts with a list. These are books I've covered in the last few years that have been adapted. The Irishman we've talked about many times. Martin Scorsese's movie that's on Netflix, starring De Niro and Al Pacino. It's based on a 2004 narrative nonfiction book by Charles Brand called I Hear You Paint Houses. I had covered that for Tribeca way back when. Then subsequently, I read 2 drafts doing what's called comparison coverage to analyze the differences in the drafts as they evolved, and it became called The Irishman. The supposed confession of the real-life hitman who killed Jimmy Hoffa in 1975. Another novel I just recently covered was Eruption. This is a posthumous creation of Michael Crichton, just came out, and it was revamped by his widow and was completed by James Patterson. Mega bestseller, apocalyptic disaster blockbuster. I covered for Centropolis Entertainment, which is the production company of Roland Emmerich, very big epic disaster film director. That's now reportedly set up at Sony Pictures. I covered for Tribeca also The Wager by David Grann, new book by the author of Killers of the Flower Moon, which is historical action like Mutiny on the Bounty. That's set up with Leonardo DiCaprio and Martin Scorsese. For Sony, I covered Fleischman is in Trouble, 2019 novel, New York set comedy drama about sex and marriage, streaming series on Hulu. The Other Black Girl, 2021 novel, office drama and suspense. I wrote in my coverage that it does for racism what the Stepford Wives did for sexism. If there's any fans of that show, it's also streaming on Hulu. And I covered A Man in Full, which is by, for me, the late, great author Tom Wolfe, a novel from 1998 that only just got made with Jeff Daniels, a drama about the fall of a successful businessman. And I covered it so long ago. I covered it for a company that doesn't even exist anymore called Polygram Filmed Entertainment. And one reason, just very quickly, why I do this in terms of also just to show you how hot book adaptations are, but even more is to show what these books have in common, which is absolutely nothing. So which is by way of saying, don't worry about what you hear is selling. Write what you want, just have a good story. And also then try to make sure you have a good story. We can talk about this time, ways of trying to determine, what will make a good story. And then if you do, run with it and don't give up. I mean, Man in Full, I hope, is a good example too. 20 plus years before that made it to the screen. So I hope that's useful.
Very useful. And one of the things between you and Lane I want to talk about before we go to Kelly and Jill Michelle is oftentimes people think they have to publish before they can actually take their idea forward. Now, can you each give us your thoughts about unpublished material and why that might actually be a benefit?
Lane?
I'm a huge fan of unpublished material, huge fan, because Hollywood has these 2 questions that I really hate. The first question is, how many books have sold? Which, by the way, doesn't mean anything, because, in Bookland, you sell 40,000, 60,000 books, everyone's cheering. Hollywood's used to millions, they're used to box office. So they hear 40,000, they don't care. So they don't have the right perspective to even have that question answered. And aside from that, they'll say, is it a bestseller? And I always think that's kind of stupid, because look at the Duff. Nobody heard of it. And then the movie came out and it was a bestseller. That's what happens. Like, let the project go forward and then it will be a bestseller. So the only way to get around these annoying questions is to get material prior to publication, which I do a lot. And I actually love that, because also, for example, I had a great project called Reboot with Peter Chernin, and that came to me as a zombie book. But I went back to them because it was not published yet. And I said, there's 1,001 zombie projects, but no one's ever heard of a reboot. How about if we call them reboots? So it really, you can actually help yourself by making your book more unique if I can sneak in there before it's published. So I'm a huge fan, and a lot of times I've set up things. Honestly, I set up a project with Scott Stuber on an 11-page book proposal. I don't need the whole book. I need a really cool idea that I can sell it with a log line. And honestly, they're not going to read the book anyway. As Mark will tell you, they're going to get coverage, and it's goes in their system, and then forever and ever and ever it's in their system. So I try not to give them the book as much as possible. I meet it out like little breadcrumbs. I give them like, oh, guess what? 20 pages came in, even if I have the whole thing, because they're not going to read it anyway. And I'd rather keep them a little bit pregnant, keep, tossing a couple pages at them, because then it won't end up in their system. And then if there's what we call the executive shuffle, someone goes away, new execs come in, I can bring back the same material because they don't know they've seen it before. So it just works for me. So I'm a huge fan of pre-publication material. I also don't want to be on the list. I'm sure Kelly has the list, which is, the minute they read in Publishers Marketplace that they're going to have galleys of something, everyone, their mother calls, and they have a huge list of who gets sent on this, I don't want to be on that list. I want to get there ahead of time. In fact, I absolutely love when I go to the, book expo, and these guys are always say to me like, oh, we know about all the projects you have. I'm like, really? How about this one? How about this one? How about this? They're like, where are you getting these? I'm like, they haven't been published yet. So they're not in the, zeitgeist with 900,000. So I'm a very huge fan. And I also, by the way, do not care if it's a well-known author, which I do work with a lot of those, or someone who just started. I mean, Cody Keplinger was 16 when she did The Duff. No one heard of her. She'd never written anything. And it became a movie because I was obnoxious about it. So there you go.
Yes.
Mark?
Yeah, so just to be clear, every title I cited and almost all the titles I read, it is before publication. It's either in manuscript form or proofs, so because they're going out to try to start a bidding war before the publication actually happens for a book they know will be a bestseller. Could you try to sell an unpublished manuscript that doesn't even have a book deal pending? Yeah, more power to you if you can. So I've covered those as well. And you just treat it like anything else. I mean, can this fly? But also, just to piggyback on something which I think is really important advice, what I would tell anybody, because I do writing workshops at NYU, get it right in the pitch stage. Before you type fade in, get it 3 to 5 paragraphs, make sure it hangs together, it's compelling, it's original. You've got your inciting incident is almost always the hook. Go through this really fast, and you want the who, what, when, where, and why of journalism. That's all got to be in the pitch. Make sure it works. Need creates character. Get it right before the toil and tears of trying to bang out a screenplay, and whether or a proposal. Even better, if you have 6 paragraphs, make it 3 pages. Anyway, that's what I think that's wise to do.
Thank you. And so that's why Mary was talking about copyright, because when you have something that's unpublished, I often get, how do I protect this? And what do I do with this? And I tell people you can certainly put copyright on the bottom of whatever you're submitting. And sometimes people will also put certificate numbers from different organizations on them. Lane, what do you do when you see those?
Oh,
It's good for people to hear. Yeah, Merrick, go first. Go ahead.
So I just want to add here, so the copyright registration with the U.S. Copyright Office is very important, because the Supreme Court in the last year, I think maybe year and a half, decided that in order to start a copyright infringement suit, you actually need to have your actual physical registration. So there's no suing without the actual registration in hand. And so whatever other organizations may be out there that you believe are a good place to register, sure, but it's the Copyright Office that matters. The other thing is, the Copyright Office is not a file saving place, meaning you should not be registering version 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 15 with the Copyright Office. That's not how it works. So generally speaking, my rule of thumb and advice is go register the version of your script, that you feel is strong enough that you want to share with other people or start sharing with other people. What that version is for you, I don't know, but in my experience, speaking to clients, that's usually somewhere between version 4 and 6. I've heard other people, nope, version 2, I'm out, I'm hustling. And I'm like, okay, good. Yeah, like it's not my business what you want to register, but it should be, again, the full expression of your idea and as developed as possible. Those are my 2 cents.
Lane? Thanks, Mary.
Yeah, very, very important to make sure because you can't copyright an idea, as Mary said. So the thing that you're using to sell your material, a log line usually, is something that highlights what's very unique about your story. And I very much recommend you to focus on what is unique about your story, both for copyright purposes and also for pitching purposes, for your query letter, you name it. The more specific you are, the more you focus on what's unique about your idea, the less you're going to find somebody else running away with it. And, because they don't have your story, they don't know your story. So I think it's really, really important to keep that in mind when you are going to do a copyright. As Mary said, you can't do a million drafts. Hone it till it highlights what is super unique about your story. That's the way I sell things as well. So it's helpful for you for copyright purposes, and it's helpful for me because then I know how to sell it. And it's helpful for publishers and editors and anyone who has to sell your material.
Speaking of which, when somebody has a book that they want to use, oftentimes they'll turn in the back of the book to the acknowledgments. And then they will find the literary agent who has been thanked for helping them get the book published. Sometimes people will go off on their own and decide to do an adaptation, which we've covered. That's not the right path. But sometimes they end up on your door, Kelly. And then they call and then they start asking questions. Can you tell us what that's like for you and what the do's and don'ts are?
Sure. It's always a great thing. We love hearing that. All of my authors, we want them to be able to lift their story off of the page. And it's not just fiction, it's not just stories. I do a lot of nonfiction, and that can move off the page as well to become a docuseries, a documentary. Literally right before this, I had a Zoom call about a book that just came out that we're doing a podcast for. So that was adapted into a podcast. So it's always very exciting. We want them to be able to build their platform and, do more things and reach more audiences. Oh, did I just freeze? I
No,
think I
you're
just
fine.
froze. Oh, okay.
You're still moving.
Okay. Mine just like totally froze. I don't know if it did that for anyone else. So yeah, so it's great. We love that. So, the first thing conversation would be, has it already been optioned? Has it already been shopped? So for us, with my agency, we have a lot of connections with a lot of different directors, producers, production companies, studios. So we tend to do a lot of shopping ourselves. So, I might say, well, I don't want to do a shopping agreement for this person because we have the ability to do that. Or do they have, I might say, what are your connections like? Are you in a better position to? Are you more well known? And if that's the case, then it might, behoove us to go with that person over just our connections. We would want to figure out, do they want to do option? Do they want to do shopping? Do we want to do option? Do we want to do shopping? And kind of speak to the author and see what their needs are. What is a must-have for them versus what can they kind of compromise on. So, they might say, I absolutely need to be a little more involved in this process. So that might change who we work with. They might say, I absolutely am not doing it for free. I'm not doing a shopping. They have to do an option, and that's going to change, you know, our decision and how we're going to move forward. So it's kind of trying to assess what is the need, what is the goal, what works best for everybody. And I would probably have a kind of introductory conversation where I meet the person first and say, you know, what are your goals? Who are you? What are you looking to do? And see, do they kind of come with a package? Because that's always more attractive as well, right? Like if Reese Witherspoon came to us and said, hey, we just read your book and I want to make this into a movie. Yes, please. I thank you. That would be wonderful. Yeah, yes is going to be the answer. You know, but if it's just somebody who's kind of just starting out, maybe they've directed a couple commercials, or maybe they've only done a couple shorts, I might be a little more reticent to say, I'm not sure you're the person to move this forward, especially if I have other people to move it forward. So I might say, like, is there someone else that you have attached? Do you have somebody that has experience doing book to film adaptations? We have a option right now for one of my books, a memoir, Winning in Reverse, and we have a director, a couple of producers on board, and we're at the phase where we're ready to either get a screenwriter or try to find that seed money. And I've made it very clear, I do not want them to bring in anybody who has not done a book to film adaptation before, because that is very, very important. And I've learned that from Lane. You know, I want somebody that understands how to do that, because it's a different animal. It's a different story. You have to like consolidate characters sometimes, or cut out characters, or move quicker. There's a lot less words in a screenplay than there is in a book. Yeah, so there's going to be, you know, different sorts of conversations going on. I'm going to be looking out for different things. Obviously, my goal is to protect my author, make sure that they're not giving anything away, that they're going to be protected, that they're feeling comfortable with the people involved, with the process, with the goal. But we love it. Honestly, it's a great thing. I've never had somebody say, hey, I'm interested in one of your books, and I want to have a conversation to see where we can move it forward. I'm always going to take that conversation, you know, that meeting, even if it's only for networking and connecting. I think it's great. So if any of you guys are interested, you know, and you want to have a network and have a call with me, let's do it.
Thank you. You know, one of the things that you brought up that's so important to us is things like a docuseries, things that end up on television, things that end up on streaming. And there's no better person to talk to about that than Joe Michelle, because that's where those stories, that's where that background comes from. And so, Joe Michelle, can you give us some insight when somebody says, I have a great series for you, and it's based on something else? What are the hurdles? What are the hurdles? Because today it's a little bit like the Wild West with all the different options people have, but they still have to stay in the guidelines, right?
Yes. I mean, like Lane, we're still gonna ask, do you have the rights to this material? And these days, like you were saying early, Jennifer, pre-existing IP can be almost anything right now. You had mentioned an article, Pam and Tommy, the scripted series was an article. Inventing Anna was a series of articles. It was a book. Barbie was a doll. Clue, a board game. Tetris, a Nintendo game. IP can really be almost anything that already exists. Much like with music, books is one thing. It's usually a single author and you have a publisher. Music is different. There's multiple avenues you have to make sure that you have everyone signed off on. The last thing anybody wants is a lawsuit or, you know, terrible publicity. You also don't want to say something is based on a true story when it's scripted. So you really want to respect the IP and the people involved. If you're behaving in an ethical manner, kind of like when Lane was talking about Sandra Brown, and how she would have her on all the calls. Not everybody does that, but Lane does that. And so you want to align with a producer who operates in such a way, and they move through this process in such a way where everyone is respected. So you want to respect the IP, you want to respect the creators, the licensing, the law, and the story. So really that's what we're looking for in order to move forward.
Now, with some of the series that you've seen that have been based on different ideas, one of the things, what are some of the things when it comes to a series, especially in streaming these days, since Mary mentioned there's so many problems occurring over at Netflix, what are some different attention-getting pieces people should actually be looking at before they start trying to move one of those forward?
I mean, like with Baby Reindeer, you don't want to say something is a true story if it's scripted. By the whole nature of what scripted is, it's not a true story. It's someone's point of view on a story. A documentary, like Navalny, for instance, like that is a true story because it's Navalny telling his truth. And there's recorded phone calls. So, you know, you need to stay within the confines of the law and work in an ethical manner. If you go rogue, you're going to wind up in a pickle. And I quite honestly, I'm seeing more and more people going rogue. And you don't want to do that. And I know people think, oh, attorney, I have to pay all these fees. You're going to wind up paying more if you don't just get an attorney. And you don't want to get a real estate attorney and be like, hey, can you look over this contract? Because there's different terminology in entertainment contracts, like this little bugger of a word, meaningful. And then you've got genres, you know, you've got indie film, you've got documentaries, you've got publishing. You have dolls. I mean, so you want an entertainment attorney that understands what your genre is, what is normal. The last thing you want is for an attorney who practices real estate to tell someone that the deal they have is terrible and to be pushing back on things that don't matter. And you irritate a network or a production company and it goes away. So I hope that makes sense.
To Jill Michelle's point, one of my lowest professional moments was when the most darling author came to me and said that he wanted accounting statements from his publisher because he hadn't received any money and didn't know, but his book was selling really well. And I said, well, let me look at your agreement. And so that you all know, a traditional publishing deal is simply a license to publish your book. His document was a transfer and assignment of the copyright to the publisher. Yes, go ahead, fall out of your chairs. And then I said to him, and I wanted to cry, really. And I said, did you have an attorney look at this? And he said, of course I did. I'm not stupid. Of course, why would I do something without like having an attorney look at it? And I said, an entertainment lawyer, thinking, oh, good Lord, is it someone I know? And he said, no, my real estate lawyer.
Wow. To that point, also, your literary agent will do that for you as well. So if you have a literary agent, you don't need to also bring in an entertainment lawyer unless you want to. It'll end up costing you money and they might make more headaches as well because we're negotiating on your behalf. And we, we adhere to the canon of ethics, especially if you're a member of the ALA. So if you have an agent, you should never be in that situation. We are looking at all that fine print. So I'm assuming, Mary, he didn't have an agent, or if he did, he probably had someone that was 12 years old and was scamming him.
No agent.
No agent, yeah.
And he was the sweetest man. And
Lane.
Is there recourse for that? Can you sue in that situation?
well, there was no duress. He was fully mentally capable, and there's no, the law doesn't reward you for being stupid. So I say adults can do stupid things all day long. They just can't do illegal things. So
Lane.
I just want to go back a little bit to the meaningful thing that Jill Michelle brought up. So a lot of times you will get what they call meaningful consultation. How meaningful is that? Not very, because you're not paying for it. So what's going to happen is they're going to say, what do you think of these people that we want to cast? And you're going to go, I hate that, I hate that, I hate that. And they're going to go, okay, thank you so much for your opinion. And they're going to do it anyway, because it's their money, right? They're putting out the millions of dollars to make it a TV series or whatever it is. So, and I noticed, by the way, in the chat that someone was asking about an EP credit. So I'll mention that as well. Credits are very, 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 very difficult to get. It's not like people throwing out, hey, have a credit. Never happens. Case in point, my first project was The Duff, and I did everything for 7 years on that project. And guess what? I did not get the credit that I should have gotten, which was producer. Anyway, so credits, no, they're not going to throw an EP credit at you. Never. It's something you have to fight tooth and nail to get. You have to prove that you've added, a ton of value, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Most people will get what they call meaningful consultation. Most authors will get meaningful consultation. And we just know that that doesn't mean a lot. And it's specifically because you're not putting in the big bucks for your project to get made.
Two quick stories on that, since Lane brought that to light. The first one is Nicholas Sparks, who did a Today Show interview. And if you know anything about Nicholas, he's pretty prolific. And many of his stories at this point have been adapted to film. However, for more than 10 years, they would not allow Nicholas Sparks to set foot on any set for his films, not even for meaningful consultation. And in the Today Show interview that he did, he was talking about how complicated it was for him as an author to have to give over his story, knowing that he wasn't going to be able to get on that set at all, even to provide insight on the very characters that came out of his head. Another person I had the privilege of interviewing when I had a radio show years ago was Anne Rice, who I truly appreciated as a human as well as a writer. And Anne has a wonderful son, Chris, who made all of the arrangements. And the two of them talked to me about one most significant thing for Anne that really bothered her all her life since she became a writer. She was never allowed on any set all her life for anything that was adapted from what she wrote. However, Anne was the same person who would answer every comment on her Facebook page. Every time somebody would put a comment there, it was very important to her that she be the person, not somebody else, who answered it. And yet, they never let her on a set. So what Lane is talking about is really important, because sometimes when you create something that's so vivid, so real, so wonderfully driven as a story, whether it's character driven or plot driven or both, there is this notion that you should be aware of that you may not be on that set, like ever. Like not the first time, not the last time, like ever. You may be at the Oscars as somebody who actually provided the IP. However, that's something that a lot of writers wrestle with, especially when they want to bring something that they've created as IP to another medium, because that's something that you will have to come to terms with. And asking for the credit and making the credit something that becomes pivotal or else will knock you back down. inevitably. So beware. You have to be
A
careful
good
when you want red herrings. You've got to be able to come to terms with things that you really do want. I want my book to be on the screen. I want my film to be on the stage. I want that term. I want, you have to be very, very aware of what you're saying after those two pivotal words. Kelly.
Yeah. A good literary agent will manage your expectations and let their authors know that they're not going to get everything that they want, but they will try to fight for you. So I will try my best to always ensure that my authors are going to get meaningful consultation or a consulting credit. It is not always likely, but I'm going to try for it. So, if you have a good agent, let them know the things that you would want. And to have that early discussion early on and say, hey, listen, my author would like to at least be on set one day. I've heard of these situations where authors are banned, but he or she knows they're not allowed to have it. They just want to be there for the experience. Then okay, then it might be a different thing. Or they may say to me, hey, we want you to be there. We want you to be involved. This is your story. Tell us what it's wrong. And in the situation with Bill's book, they specifically said they want him there because he is a NASCAR driver and he has the experience that nobody else in the production has. And so he's going to point out when things are done wrong, when it wouldn't happen like that. And so he brings a valuable skill set that they want him there. So there are those situations that are the reverse of that, but I feel like that's probably more the exception to the rule.
And I like
Go
to
ahead.
actually drill down with clients, like, what you want, I will try, but ultimately every deal has to be what you need, right? Because you're going to have to live with it. And so I always say a good contract or a good negotiation is when both parties get what they need and not necessarily what they want. The other thing is, while as a lawyer and like any class you may take, any whatever will say, protect the copyright, protect the copyright, protect the copyright, protect your work, protect your work. Guess what? You're going to have to trust someone at some point. And you're going to have to let go at some point. And it's not going to be exactly what you had envisioned. It's going to be someone else's vision. Because again, we are different people. We see things through different spectrums. And Lane can tell you, she can pitch the same project to 5 different places and they will want to have that depicted 5 different ways. So there is a moment of a truth moment with yourself on how much you actually want to get it out there and how much you want to control. Because if you want to control everything, it's never going to happen.
Jill Michelle, I know that's your cue. Go for it.
When people operate in such a way that they are so scared that their pitch is going to be stolen, I have seen it so many times. I've experienced it with someone I was partnered with. They kill the deal. The deal winds up going away because they either drag their feet too long or they are so suspicious of the partners that crazy ideas start coming out of their mouth and you're like, who is this person? You are not the same person. Like, at some point you do need to trust people. But what I always advise is, when you're meeting with an attorney, a lit agent, a producer like Lane, someone like me, a Mark, anyone, have a talk with them, feel them out. It's not just about them choosing you. You have to choose them too. You're signing a legal contract. You are getting into legal bed with these people. And this process isn't 6 months. It's not even a year. This is going to go on and on and on. And you want to make sure that in this legal, marriage, so to speak, that you guys like each other and are on the same page and you have the same vision for your project. If you're talking about, a fairyland fantasy story, you don't want to go with somebody who wants to make Alien. You know, you got to have the same vision and the same goals. And if you're fine with like, you know, a streamer like Shutter who's doing amazing things, you know, more power to you, but they are not Netflix, you know? So it's about managing expectations and making sure your goals are aligned. Just make sure you choose each other.
100%. Lane, I'm going to come to you in just a second. You know, 100%, because one of the things that you really have to think about, whether it's a literary agent, whether it's a screenwriting agent, whether it's a producer, whether you're working with your IP with somebody else, I said it at the beginning, I'm going to repeat it. It's a team sport. You have to pick your kickball team so that you can win. You don't want to feel every day when you get up that you're at odds with your team, because they're not going to like it. They're not going to like it when you act out, and they're going to kill the project because it will be better for them to move on. Lane?
I cannot tell you how many people I have discovered in this industry are their own worst enemies. They get their first project going and they want the moon, which is never going to happen. And, you know, you have to imagine that every single one of these studios, networks, executives, etc., have a billion projects. They're all being pitched all the time, just like me. And the second there's one that's a pain in the butt, guess what? That one's going, because they've got a million others sitting in the background ready to go. So it's really about, as Mary said, you know, pick and choose your battles. It's what you need, not what you want. And imagine, you know, if you could, you know, suck it up a little as you go, eventually you'll have the resume that you don't have to suck it up as much, right? So that's the way to do it. And then you don't have to worry about, you know, people basically saying, go away. I don't care that we, you know, greenlit this project. You're becoming a big pain in the butt. And, you know, it's sad, but it's true. They really, there are so many things that sit on the development shelf forever because, you know, the author got crazy, or, you know, the screenwriter got crazy, or whatever. You know, they want things that just aren't realistic. And for me, like, I mean, I'm very, as I mentioned, inclusive. Like, I brought Cody Keplinger to the set of The Duff because they didn't invite her. And guess what? I brought her. But here's the thing about Cody. I made sure through this process to keep her updated, because there is no way her book was ever going to go to screen exactly as written. Number one, you're in the character's head the entire time. Film is a visual medium. How are you going to do that? So it's got to change. Second of all, there was no antagonist in the book. The antagonist was herself. She was her own worst enemy. You have to create that for the audience. So it's, again, visual. So we made Madison. So I had to keep her updated. Also, the book is a little R-rated, and they wanted a PG-13 movie. So these are things that happen in the development process. And I just didn't want Cody to have a heart attack when she went to see the movie. And I could explain to her what these decisions were made and what they were doing, so that when she went on her Facebook and had questions from people, she could answer them and say, look, I'm still excited about it. It's going to be a little different from the book, but blah, blah, blah. Because the last thing you want is your author bad-mouthing your movie before it comes out. But also, I think it's really important to keep them in the loop. They're not necessarily, as you mentioned, Kelly, going to be on set or whatever. And so my job, if I'm doing my job right, is also to represent them. Just like you said, Kelly, I'm the only one in that development room. So like when they said we can't call it The Duff, I'm like, oh, that's non-negotiable. Let's discuss, you know? So you have to have someone that you believe is going to fight for you, because you can't be there. And that's very, very, very important.
I want to point out and have Mark just chime in here, because Mark, you have that thumbs up, thumbs down, and then you're not really part of the conversation, right?
I'm not really part of which conversation.
Whether they're going to choose to move it forward or not.
Oh yeah, no. Well, I mean, yes and no.
Can you
I mean,
tell us about that? That's what I want, the yes and no.
oh, yeah. No, I mean, well, let me phrase it this way. When I do my writing workshops at NYU, for example, and we do the equivalent of a table read, and people bring in script pages to read aloud. I say that the conversations we're going to have in this class, in this workshop, are the same conversations that are being had at the highest levels of development, and I know because I've had them. I have spoken to vice presidents of production and executives and Jane Rosenthal, you know, and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, just these are the conversations to be had. And it's, of course, collaborative. And what I'm just sort of, a kind of a screener. So no, I'm not in a position where anything's getting green lighted, but it is very collaborative. And for example, I mean, I don't know if we've ever cited before, Wag the Dog. I mean, this goes way, way back to Tribeca. One of the first things I ever did for them. It was based on a novel called American Hero by Larry Beinhardt, which nobody remembers or cares about. It was adapted by a woman who wound up getting credit, but not a single word of her script was used. Not a single word. It was co-written by, it was revised by David Mamet, and he really did the whole thing. But I remember in those days, we were just all collaborating on this doesn't work, this doesn't work, this doesn't work. And a lot of what we discussed, including what I discussed, wound up in the final script. So it does happen, but I'm not sure. Does that answer? I'm not sure where your question was going with that.
It is, because all of us have our different roles and pieces that if you have an adaptation, chances are you're going to bump into us, right? And like for me, I'm on the consultative side for people who basically say, oh, I want to whatever, right? And then lots of the pieces have to be brought together in order for you to do that. So there is an important question that I want to start with, Mary, which actually was echoed by Mark, which is great, about copywriting a pitch, copywriting a log line. Can we talk about that for just a moment before we actually dive into other questions?
Yeah. So, the one thing I wanted to mention about earlier is under US copyright law, there is a copyright affixed the moment like a work receives copyright protection the moment it is fixed in a tangible medium. So you don't have to go off and register it for there to be a valid and existing copyright. It just helps with a lot of things. As I mentioned, you can't start a lawsuit without it. So to answer your question, can you copyright a log line or a pitch or even a short treatment? Yeah, but why? Right? So the question here is like, it's the Library of Congress. And I know that we don't go to libraries anymore, but it is a public place where people can pull your work out of. It's a library. They can check your work out. So I wouldn't make something public unless you really wanted it to be public, right? So I would say a log line will never receive full copyright protection because it's simply one, maybe two sentences long. I've had a pitch. Now, there are pitches and there are pitches, right? So if it's a Bible, if it's a full pitch deck, if it is a full expression of that idea, perhaps yes. But if your pitch is like 3 paragraphs in 1 page, no, don't bother. And again, a treatment, right? If the treatment is, and I've had clients do this to me, like, you know, they send me 2 paragraphs. And I'm like, oh, this is a great treatment. Should I copyright it? I'm like, absolutely not. It will get bounced and laughed out of the copyright office. Don't do that to yourself. So yeah, I just don't see the point, right? Like go write, like you can't have a log line without actually writing the material. So go write the material. And again, it's idea versus expression. I mean, Lane and you're the genius. You're the guru of log lines, for God's sakes. Come up with a log line. We could probably slap it on like 15 different projects, right? So let's not do that.
Just
Last,
quick,
yeah, go ahead.
just on that point, because I have people, it doesn't happen a lot, but occasionally, because I do the writer's workshop, as I just said, people are bringing in their pages. Occasionally there'll be a student writer. My idea is so brilliant, I'm afraid somebody in the class is going to steal it, especially now since we went all Zoom since COVID. Is that now they're disseminated, pages are being disseminated online. You don't really know who's going to get it or who it could be transferred to. what protection does that person have, or do they have any? I tend, and Mary, you probably disagree, I say, all right, in pinch, just register it with a WGA. It's something better than nothing. I don't know if that even makes sense.
No, it doesn't do anything. Now, that being said, word to the wise, and I know that everyone loves homework, and when lawyers assign more tasks, why not? But when you are going to a class or a workshop or things like that, or even pitching, taking meetings with producers, I always say, so going back to the definition of what a copyright infringement is, right? You have to prove access to the original. So substantial similarity is important, but without the access, you've got no case. And I've encountered many, many people throughout my career who've clearly had copyright infringing, like they were the originators of a work that's been copyright infringed, but they could never prove access. So they're dead in the water. So keep a chart, keep a nice, Excel spreadsheet, Word sheet, whatever works for you. Who you spoke with, who you sent it to, the dates, what that conversation was about, email correspondence. Why? Not because I like creating work for you, but because if you need to prove access, you can quickly do a search and their name pops up. Now, people also move around, so keep the company name, right? All these sorts of things. Now, if you're attending a workshop, a panel, there should be a list of the participants. Keep the list of the participants. Yes, you become very not litigious, but protective in that sense. But it makes sense in the long run. And also, I always say, people will say, well, I met someone and I pitched it right there and then, and how am I going to prove that? Well, in kindergarten, we learned about thank yous and thank you notes, at least at kindergarten, if not earlier. So you write a very nice email. Thank you for your time over coffee. It was great bumping into you in the elevator. It was wonderful to share my ideas with you. It's called a CYA. We have to CYA every now and again, and you can couch it in a very polite thank you letter. And this way you have it in your email box, and also blind copy yourself, because if you're like me, my sent box goes kablooey every now and again, and I don't know what I've sent to anyone, or there are days missing. I'm like, how could there be days missing? So blind copy yourself, belt and suspenders. And this way you've got a nice little record and you seem very polite.
So Michelle.
I don't know if I've ever shared this before. Back when I was a wee little associate producer, I created a show and I pitched the show. And I was told the show was terrible. It had a terrible name and it had a terrible log line. And let's have pitch meetings to turn it into something completely different, and then stopped hearing from them. 6 months later, I'm reading the trades. Comedy Central has picked up the show I pitched, same name, same log line, except it had the word comedians in it. No lie. Figured out how they did it. They had done it before, and it had a WGA registration. I called the WGA and they were like, there's nothing we can do. It's essentially a date and a timestamp. You can achieve the same thing by emailing it to yourself. So when that happens to you, you can like figure things out really fast. I was a member of the Producers Guild and wound up talking to the president of the Producers Guild. And I learned a lot. Those guys really took the time and helped baby producer Jill out in that moment. Copyright is absolutely the way you want to go. The other thing you can do, if you don't want to send out PDFs, you should always keep a grid, but you can create a password protected website now. And that will actually even track IP, and you can see how many times people have logged in. So that's another way you can go. Unfortunately, these things do happen. Are they tremendously common? I would say no, because the last thing a producer wants is to be accused of stealing. It's not, you're not going to go far as someone accused of stealing. You become radioactive. Networks don't want to work with you. They don't want to risk a lawsuit. So it's not the norm. Just know it's not the norm, but sometimes it happens.
It does happen. I actually had an elite coaching client who was an executive producer who was asked to be a writer on a project for somebody else who was producing the project. And for 2 years, she had worked on that project and they were out searching for talent. And she wrote me a distressed email and told me, oh my God, this is what happened. Well, what happened was Plan B got wind of what they were doing, and they put out a press release saying that they were doing that project on the same subject, and the same subject matter, with the same bent that they were actually doing. And the project died on the vine after all the work that had been done. I do a series in my newsletter on called Asked and Answered, and I actually run some of these situations that have happened like this. And that's why copyright is something that's really important. We're going to answer some of the questions. Go ahead, Mir.
The law does recognize the concept of synchronicity, though, right? Similar
does.
ideas coming up in the ether of the world and ideas. And then I don't remember, was it Lane with the Amy Fisher saga on 3 different networks in the 80s, or whenever it was, 90s maybe? We're so old at this point, who knows? But, and the same night, but it's not uncommon. You get a narrative film and then someone makes a documentary about the topic or makes another film that's very similar, maybe within 6 months of it. It happens. I mean, but again, if this really were the Wild West, nothing would ever get done.
Well, the other thing that you bring up, since you brought up Amy Fisher, is the question we often get. So let's go there. Then we're going to go to a memoir question that we have. Is a title able to be copywritten?
No, titles, character names are not copyrightable. So those of you who are filmmakers or of any audiovisual medium, go ahead and use the spine of books if it's just the font. But artwork on a cover is protected, but titles, character names, none of that is protected.
Kelly.
I just wanted to bring up on the Amy Fisher thing. The reason why 3 different networks were able to do the same story was because her story was in the public domain. Because anytime you are arrested, it is public knowledge. You no longer have reasonable expectation of privacy, and anybody can write a story about anything you've done that was illegal. So it was illegal, it was in the press, court transcripts could be taken from, interviews could be utilized. So that's why they didn't have to obtain Amy Fisher's life rights. And I don't know if there was a book at that point about it. Yeah, I know that Mary hasn't gone through the whole diatribe about public domain in the 73 years. Maybe we should tap into her to explain that a bit.
Okay, so public domain is not something that is popular or something that's been in the papers. Public domain is actually works that have been created currently prior to 1928. And so again, going back to that, Happy Birthday is now in the public domain and it's under appeal. So again, if you're a filmmaker, run, don't walk, and use Happy Birthday in every scene of your project. And so, again, you do a little searching. Now, that doesn't mean everything post 1928 is not in the public domain or protected for that matter. So we need to have some research done because copyright law is evolving, the statute of limitations and the duration of copyright protection has changed throughout our course of history as a nation. So there may be some works from the 1940s, 50s, 60s that they were required to renew and refile, but didn't. So there might be some works that should be still protected that are not because they forgot to take the proper steps. But generally speaking, pre-1928. Now, what Kelly was referring to is the fact that when you're doing something, especially so defamation has there is a higher threshold of proof for public figures. They have to actually prove there was actual malice. And we don't see much of this because once you go to court and depositions happen and cross-examinations happen, your character is under attack. So we don't get to see all these fascinating things. So that's why Johnny Depp's case was amazing, because that was about actual malice and he was able to show that. And, you know, a lot of other dirty laundry that came out of that. But generally speaking, if you're going to do a story about a public figure, what we usually recommend is that you get at least 3 to 5 different sources for that material. So if it was in the New York Times, the Washington Post, blah, 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 you know, on and on, great, cite those. Please never cite Wikipedia. That's happened. Yeah, don't ask. And so that is called vetting. You know, you annotate the script and it's fully vetted. And so you reference where information has come from. So there is one thing about dealing with public figures and the other about public domain, which is totally, it's copyrighted work that is now free for everyone to use.
And on that note, just know that producers, even like Steven Spielberg, when he did Lincoln, you know, amassed 4 books that he was actually using to define those 2 years of the film that he was covering. So this is something that is well known and often done and well done. I want to give us a question from Carol Lee. If adapting a memoir, besides getting the author's permission, do you have to get permission from people mentioned in the memoir if they become characters in a TV pilot adapted from the book?
Well,
I will say, just in terms of the book itself, if I have somebody that's writing a memoir and they are writing something scathing about somebody in their life, I'm very concerned. I'm very concerned. Do I want to sign them? So I will have conversations with them about how much they have changed, you know, and changing just the name isn't enough if it can be tracked back to them. For instance, Amber Heard did not mention Johnny Depp's name in the op-ed that she wrote. I believe it was in the New York Times about Johnny Depp, but it was very clear that it was Johnny Depp because of their very public relationship. So she was still liable and still was able to be sued and inevitably lost. So it's not enough for the name, you know, so you want to protect yourself. As the agent, I want to make sure my author's protected. You know, you want to change as much as you can, change the gender, change the age, change where they're from, change the ethnicity. What else can you change so that it's not blatantly obvious who this person was, right? If you're talking about your ex-husband, you've only been married once, we kind of have a problem there. You got to figure out a way to change that, unless you're saying amazing things about the ex-husband and you have a great relationship with him and he doesn't care and he wants you to say amazing things, you know, that's a different story. So it really depends on what you're writing too. You know, how are you making that person look?
well, many years ago, because we've been doing this for a long time, Jennifer, you may recall this. This was way back when we did these live, like with real people in front of us. This woman stood up and said she was writing a script based on her ex-husband, who is an investment banker, who had embezzled money, was a drug user, a pornographer. I mean, like, she just cited everything bad, and I was just like, oh my, I don't think you should do that, because, you know. And I said, but why don't you make it an ex-wife? And wouldn't it be fascinating? Unless you can prove all of this is the truth, right? Because an absolute defense for defamation is the truth. And she said, in a safe, I have evidence of everything. And I said, you have proof of everything? She said, yeah. I said, this might be the only time in my entire career. I said, go with God. So, hey, you know, one never knows.
Well, writing about real people is really one of those slippery slopes that oftentimes it is one of the best things to actually get it in front of an attorney before you get questions from people like Lane and people like Jill Michelle and people like Kelly, because they basically are going to look twice and 3 times and 4 times before they actually decide that they want to invest some time. Right, Jill Michelle?
Yes.
All right, so we have Lolly. Hi, Lolly, I know you're on your phone. And Lolly asked, I'm an author and have a published memoir. I just signed with the screenwriter who plans to shop it out for me after he writes the screenplay. He says it will be better to target a 6-episode TV deal than a movie. Do we have enough information to comment?
I've actually been hearing in conversations that the TV show stuff is being pulled back a lot, that we went through this huge boom when all of a sudden we had a million streamers and everybody was buying everything and Netflix was green lighting everything. And now it's harder to do the series because it takes more money. They go longer. There's more commitment, whereas a 2-hour movie is what it is, and then it's done. So I've been hearing that it's been a lot harder to get those series and those TV shows to move forward right now. And it might change in 6 months, it might change in a year, but I've heard that twice in the last month.
Lane, what are you hearing?
You know, I tend to go by the material. If it's big world, big idea, big, ginormous thing, it's probably a movie, you know. If it's a personal story about a psychopath, it's probably a series. I feel like sometimes the material really tells you what it wants to be. And, and Jill Michelle, I'm sure can talk about this, but so you can go from, oh, we're pitching this as a movie to, you know what, we're going to pitch this as a TV series. Going the other way doesn't work. It's very, very difficult. Don't ask me why. It's always been like that, but maybe Jill Michelle will have some insight for that.
I mean, I think it's about managing expectations. I feel like the vast majority of people I talk to are like, I want to be on Netflix, I want to be on Hulu. And the bottom line is they are not doing good deals. You know who's doing good deals and who's finding a lot of success right now are the niche streamers.
Yes.
Those are the folks that are getting eyeballs and they're actually making money.
Yeah.
So would a series work? Yes, on a smaller, more niche streamer that has an actual playbook, 1,000,000%. Netflix, bit of a pipe dream.
Mark.
Yeah, just creatively speaking, because I teach both screenwriting and TV writing at NYU, that I think that what it's right for is maybe the complexity of the project or the potential for complexity in terms of a streaming series. If you have an A story, but you also have a B story and a C story and a D story, potentially that's how you can stretch it out over that many hours, say 10 hours over a streaming series for one season. If the plotting is simply, then I think it's just better as a screenplay. I mean, it really depends on the nature of what can be expanded, what's there, what are the nature of the subplots, because otherwise, how do you fill the time? How do you fill all of those hours?
Just remember when it's TV, when it's a TV channel, a cable channel, a streaming channel, or network, they need 24/7 content. So it's really complicated for them to take something that's 2 hours long. And if it's really going to be a series, it's something that they need something. So my best example of that is Disney Plus. If we all remember when they came out, they actually gave Hamilton away for 3 months to get people to watch Disney Plus because they couldn't get any content. They basically didn't have any. And so that was one of the ways they could attract viewers was by actually doing that discount up front and then trying to figure out how they were going to fill those 24 hours. So just always keep that in mind. That's why we writers, they need us, right? Let's go to Kelly White's question. She wants to know, do life rights go away when people die?
Well, defamation does. in the US. Europe has some different stories. And
There
I'm not
won't be any
a lawyer,
defamation.
so I will not comment on that. But in the US, defamation goes away. Now states, you know, the right of privacy and the right of publicity, many states have been expanding their rights. And they've also been including voice for, you know, in sort of going forward and seeing, preventing sort of the AI issue. But if you think about the Elvis estate, things like that. So depends on, so the way we assess it as lawyers is, the right of privacy and the right of publicity are state matters. And well, we have 50 states, and there's no way for a lawyer, well, I guess if you're like maybe a professor and you've got lots of time, but most practitioners do not have the time to examine all 50 laws, all 50 states, and nor do we want to opine on a state that we're not admitted to practice in. So what we generally tend to do is find the states with the most restrictive requirements and say, follow that one, meet the needs of the most restrictive, and this way you'll pass on all the others. So you still have to be careful in doing that Elvis biopic. And
Yeah, it wouldn't be any defamation concern, just do their value of having somebody's life rights go away when they pass away, like the IP value of having that. Is that still like helpful? Is it still valid when they
you
go
mean to
away?
the estate? Like
I just
does
mean like if I have the IP rights for somebody's life story and then they pass away, does, you know, because I think people have been looking at the project because I have 2 books on it, IP of 2 books on it, plus this woman's life rights. Does the value of having life rights as a IP go away? Like somebody else can just pick up the story, you know?
no, not necessarily.
Like if I
Because-
maintain that with them.
Right, if you maintain it with the estate, because again, there's the right of privacy and publicity that may continue on depending on the state. And given the fact that the most conservative states in the country do allow it to continue, I would say, sure, there's value. Now, does the value increase because of the death, right? Does it make it more special? Depends on who died. But it wouldn't decrease in value just because they died, no.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. So I know that we're getting close. We're getting close to our time. I want to give you a question that we do have in the chat from Catherine, which is Catherine has a dear friend now in her late 80s who is a prolific author and playwright with whom she has a shopping agreement for her New York Times bestseller. She's optioned a couple of her scripts, but at this point realizes what a long shot those are. She has just written a treatment for her book. Her question is, will a producer or studio just accept the treatment?
I'm not sure I understand the question. What does she mean by will they just accept the treatment?
Go ahead,
Instead of a
Lane.
screenplay, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Right, instead of using the screenplay.
Yep.
Really depends on the producer you work with. I go from treatments all the time. But you have to know which execs are happy to just get coverage on the book and read the treatment, and that's that. You know, not everybody wants to do that. I mean, the plus in my world, obviously, is I can bring on a big muckety-muck screenwriter who everybody wants to work with, so that would be great. Are you personally going to pitch to a studio exec just your treatment? No, you are not. But the book, having the book and having a treatment so that we can get a screenwriter on to flesh it out, to do a pitch, whatever we need, is a good thing.
I want to add to that because one of the things that you should walk away from this panel with is this. Producers for every type of medium, agents for books, publishers, you have to be aware of what they are looking for. Just because you have a project doesn't mean they want yours. And if you don't do your homework and you basically, I get two things. I get, well, I want to send it to everybody. Everybody is not the right person. And the other side of it is the person I want to send it to doesn't have a way for me to get it to them. And oftentimes it either means A, you're not looking in the right places. B, you're not doing it in the ways that you could actually access them. And oftentimes for even some of my own clients, they have moved to Los Angeles so that they can actually be in the wake of the people that they want to meet. And they have. And they have been ready and prepared with things like what Jill Michelle has said, with a password protected website. So they know who's going in, they know who's looking at their project, and they are able to convey that project in 30 seconds or less. And because they can do that, they're able to actually move their project forward. A lot of this comes together when you start to understand who it is that is on the other side of your project, who's receiving it, who are you sending it to? And that's part of the value we like to bring with this panel, because when you actually walk into either any of us here, right? Either a producer or a literary agent, or it ends up in Mark's lap because somebody's asked him to take a look at it and review it, or you get someone like Mary who says, whoa, wait a minute, right? You want to be able to build your team for the project that you have. And so on that note, I'm going to go round robin with everybody for just a quick lightning round of your best tip on what to do with adaptations from your neck of the woods. And let's start with Mary, please.
Self-serving, call a lawyer. And honestly, even if it's too early, there's no such thing as too early necessarily, right? I would, and I've dealt with clients where when it's too early, and I'll say, when you get to this moment, call me. So there's a certain prognostication, but it's just better to have the conversation. There's nothing wrong. I mean, most of my colleagues and I will have a conversation with you. I'm not going to charge you. I don't even know if there's work to be done. But it's better to have the conversation and know what to expect, perhaps, if you've never done this before, than going into it blind. Start working with people, start writing things, have a question of who owns what, because a lot of people come to me and say, oh, I own this material and I've been working with someone for a year now, but I own it. And I'm like, do you have something in writing? And they say, no. I'm like, call the other person and just run this by them, because you're going to call me back and say they think they own it with me. So always try to, I know it's very unnatural, right? We don't like to paper our relationships before they happen, but think of life that way. Like, better to have something in writing, even if it's an email and a CYA, than nothing at all. Thanks for writing with me, but we were clear that I will own all the rights. But call the lawyer, just get some helpful tips. Even if it's too early, better that you be apprised of what's to come than not.
Thank you. Let's go to Lane. Quick, important tip.
I like to say, do your homework. People who approach me at my company better have a book. If they're just coming at me with a screenplay, it means they didn't do their homework. And you don't have to know a producer to do that. You can look online to find out, hey, you know what? Lifetime is doing a whole bunch of cool stuff, but they're not doing anything based in California or New York. You know why? Because all their audience is middle of the country. So, you can look at what a network has on, and it'll give you a really good feel for what kinds of material they're looking for if you're not sure about your material. And as a last comment, I always like to mention Ann Perry unfortunately passed away, but I worked with her for quite a long time. And, people would say to her at conferences, should I write about what I know? People always say, write about what you know. And she would say, write about what you care about. No one cares what you know. which I thought was fantastic advice.
in its business.
Great advice. Let's go to
Mhm.
Mark, please.
Well, my whole area is development and creativity and not production or marketing or legalities. So what I like to say is that try to keep in touch with the source of your inspiration and your ambition. It will stand you in good stead through a long time, possibly years, rejection, misunderstanding, confusion. There's a reason you're a writer, and there's a reason you're writing what you are writing. Something affected you. You might have been 8 years old, you might have been 28 years old. Something affected you that you watched or you read to the point where you said, I want to evoke those feelings in other people that are being evoked in me. So if you can stay in touch with that, at least it will just it's something to hold on to, keep you going forward.
Thank you. Kelly.
I would say make sure that you take your writer's hat off and put your business hat on. A lot of writers, become very emotional about our projects. We work on them for years. They're our babies. But you have to remember at some point, it's not your baby anymore. It is a product that somebody is buying, and you have to look at it that way. So try to be okay with killing your darlings and letting other people kill your darlings. Another piece of great advice I always give to my authors is I would rather something be done right than right now. Do not rush it. Take the time, especially when it comes to like your pitch deck and your treatments. You have one shot to get in front of somebody. This is like your resume. Your resume is going to be in front of the hiring manager before you are. You are not in that room. You can't talk. You can't speak. This pitch deck has to speak for you. So you have to make sure it looks good. It has the synopsis is really strong, because a lot of these LA types, they don't read it. Even one of the producers that's already signed on to our project, he has not read the book. He didn't read it. He signed on because of the treatment, because of the pitch deck, and it had everything it needed, the bells and whistles. So make sure you're doing your homework, you're learning about what needs to go into it, you're having other eyes, look at it very critically too. What is it missing? What is not coherent? Why is this bad? Ask you, why is this bad? Don't just ask them, why is it good? And don't just ask your friends, ask other people in the business that, or other people that hopefully in the business that can give you some real constructive criticism, because that's going to be what makes you better.
Jill Michelle.
Yeah, two quick things. One is, and we didn't really talk about it, but Mark touched on it earlier, which was storylines. Having solid storylines. If you have a rock solid story, the rest is going to come so much easier to you, and everyone's lives are going to be made easier. So I encourage you to get coverage, seek out a Mark, get feedback, and make your story better. That's number one. Number two, don't get stuck on a Netflix or a Hulu and be like, those are the two places. It's not worth pitching if you only want to go to two places. Honestly, it's not. You want to go to many places and see where the good fit is, where you're going to get a good deal, and where you like the people working there, who you're going to be working with potentially. So be open.
And the last piece is this: make sure you know where your project belongs, whether it belongs on the shelf, whether it belongs on the network, whether it belongs with that production company. If you don't know it, if you don't have the confidence and you're not sure about it, they're never going to be sure about it. So you've got to be able to do that homework first and make sure people understand. We really thank you, Women in Film, San Francisco Bay Area. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Diane. Thank you, everybody, for welcoming us so warmly. We really have enjoyed sharing all of this information, insights, and intel with you this evening. And thank you so much.
Well, thank you, everyone. Each and every one of you, the advice, the experience, the knowledge that you brought to this conversation today was extraordinary. I am so happy. I know our audience is overwhelmed with all the information. And we we give them a recording, obviously. Anyone who came, they get a recording of this so that they can digest all of the goodies you gave them. To be able to see adaptation from all the various sides of it, invaluable. Thank you so much. Jennifer had mentioned that some of you are willing to give contact information. If you are, just put it in the chat for us, if you will.
It is. Yep,
Uh,
we've done that.
Thank you. And on behalf of all of us, we want to thank you on WISPA, our community partners, and our audience that's here today that listened to you. Thank you so much for all your expertise and experience. You've made our day. And now we're just going to send you off with a big silent applause. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Good night now.
And now, everyone, for a few bits of WISPA information before we finish up. Carol Hall, our membership chair, would like to tell you about a membership discount offer linked to this event tonight. Carol?
Yes. Hi, everybody. Just for attending the event today, new or currently renewing individual members are eligible for a $15 discount on a one-year membership. And the link and code to join WISPA is in the chat. So there, when you go to register, there's a box for a discount code, which will come up, and then you type the code adaptations 15. Okay, the word adaptations is in all caps, and the number 15. So you type that code into the discount box. And so if your membership is not up yet, rest assured that other codes will be given out in future meetings. Okay, that's all I have for membership.
Well, thanks, Carol. Thanks so much. Just a few more brief updates. Our November WISPA Wednesday wind down is tomorrow night at 5:45 at the Delancey Street Restaurant in San Francisco. These wind downs, if you haven't been to them, are always a great monthly opportunity to talk film and meet potential collaborators. So click on the wind down link in the chat for more info on that. We're also very excited to be holding our second annual in-person holiday mixer coming up in December on the 14th. It'll be in Berkeley this year. It'll bring members and non-members together again for a great conversation, some nibbles and holiday cheers. So click on the holiday mixer link in the chat to register and bring a friend or two. It's great fun. And then on Monday, December 16th, is our next virtual script incubator meeting from 7 to 9. For more information on how you can participate, you can contact Carol, who you just heard from on membership, who's also the incubator coordinator, at the email address in the chat using the subject line script incubator. And if you need to do some holiday shopping, click on our store link on our website. And it's in the chat to check out our exclusive new WISPA film roll apparel. So we have sweatshirts, we've got t-shirts that say producer, director, screenwriter. Wear your film roll with pride at this holiday season and support women in film at the same time. Whether you're treating yourself or finding the ideal gift for a friend, we've got something special for everybody. So check it out. And a final thank you to our community partners, again, for their support. We couldn't do it, what we do, without you. And that's it. A big shout out and thanks to all the WISPA members who helped put this event on today, especially Darlene DeRose and Olivia Weber, who handled tech. It definitely takes a village, and it was great fun. I hope you all enjoyed yourselves. It's time to save the chat if you haven't done so already. So you can go click on those 3 dots at the bottom of the chat screen and then save it. There's a lot of information in there, so I think it'd be a good idea. We'll be closing the Zoom room shortly, so do it now. We really appreciate you all being here today, and it's our sincere hope that what you learned today will ignite your creativity, enhance your craft, and empower you and your adaptation projects in 2025 and beyond. That's the idea. All of us together, making good stories, making good films, making whatever medium works for us. So hope to see you at the holiday mixer in December, and have a great day for the rest of the evening. Okay, bye. Thanks.